against Mr. Depp, and in doing so, ruined his life by falsely telling the world that she was a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp.
Good vibes.
Today,
thank you for tuning in to the Push It Forward Podcast Network. I'm your humble executive producer, HEARD, and this is the Cosmic Convos Podcast. On Cosmic Convos, Brother Ra and myself gets into how to utilize sidereal astrology as a powerful organizing tool for your life. Whether you're talking about starting a family, getting married, raising children, starting a business, going into a new career, what career you need to choose, and a whole host of other topics relevant to everyone's life. All right. Make sure you check us out on Patreon, where we release exclusive content to all of our patrons, and you get the opportunity to directly interact with us and ask questions and even help us determine the shows that we cover on our weekly podcast. All right. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy.
You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos Podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation, the place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos Podcast. I'm your humble host, HEARD. And I got my good brother here, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Brother, never better. How about yourself, man?
Pretty good. Like I said, trying to get like you, man, or whatnot. Trying to get like you. But
hey, brother, we just reflections of each other. That's all, King.
Indeed. Well, look, we got something different going on. We got the final arguments of this Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case. We're going to do a live reaction to the final arguments and, do some different things in between or whatnot. So without further ado, they already started going. So let's go ahead and push it over to the courtroom or whatnot. So you might have to bear with me for a second because I might have some. Let's see. Yeah, mute this.
Two years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career until this trial, Ms. Heard presented herself to the world as a public
figure. This is Johnny's side presenting their case.
The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence, even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers love to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to. She inserted 2 years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse, and they would once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp. And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. The evidence presented at this trial has shown that Ms. Heard is in fact the abuser, and Mr. Depp the abused. As you heard from Mr. Depp and multiple other witnesses that testified under oath at this trial, Mr. Depp experienced persistent verbal, physical, and emotional abuse by Ms. Heard during their relationship. And when their relationship was over, Ms. Heard inflicted the greatest and cruelest injury of all. She publicly and falsely named Mr. Depp as the abuser. Ms. Heard never thought she would be held accountable never thought that she would have to face her abuser. She never thought she would have her supposed mountain of evidence vetted. She never
So,
thought
Rob,
that Mr. Depp would tell you,
have you had an
the jury,
opportunity to
and
look
the
at this
world
case
that he
a
was
little
the
bit?
real victim of domestic abuse? She said it in her own words.
You can please tell people that it was a fair fight and
Can you hear me?
see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and
Yes.
I know it's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
At the start of this case, Mr. Chu and I stood before you to give you our opening statements on behalf of Mr. Depp. During that statement, we made promises to you about what the evidence would ultimately show at the end of this trial. We've kept those promises. One of those promises we made was that you would come to understand who Ms. Heard is, that she is a deeply troubled person, violently afraid of abandonment, desperate for attention and approval. And in her relationship with Mr. Depp, she was violent, she was abusive, and she was cruel. You heard from Dr. Shannon Curry, who explained that Ms. Heard suffers from borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. These are disorders that are characterized by anger, sometimes uncontrollable and explosive anger, and a powerful, sometimes desperate need for attention, acceptance, and approval. Fear of abandonment is the deepest fear. A person with these disorders will suffer from dramatically fluctuating moods and can sometimes be violent and aggressive. They can also be charming and likable, but they can be incredibly manipulative and wild. An emotional roller coaster with wild swings, from idolizing their partner to devaluing him. In fact, you saw that when she completed testing with her own forensic psychology expert, Dr. Dawn Hughes. Ms. Heard self-reported that she felt like she had 3 or 4 different personalities, and that sometimes her temper would explode and she'd completely lose control. You heard from multiple witnesses that Ms. Heard can be very pleasant, even charming. But you also heard from multiple witnesses and in audio recordings of Ms. Heard that she can be incredibly aggressive, violent, and cruel. You heard that even from her former assistant, Kate James, Ms. James testified that Ms. Heard would scream, yell, and send her barrages of text messages. In fact, Ms. Heard testified that Ms. James testified that Ms. Heard literally spat in her face.
Yikes.
You heard from Ms. Heard's former best friend, Rocky Pennington, that Ms. Heard once hit her when Ms. Pennington did not do her best to meet Ms. Heard's needs. You also heard from Beverly Leonard that she once witnessed Ms. Heard assault her then partner in Seattle Airport in 2009. And you heard from Mr. Depp that Ms. Heard used her sister Whitney as a punching bag, literally and figuratively. You also heard overwhelming evidence from Mr. Depp and the people that were around him and Ms. Heard.
Shout out to everybody that's in the chat.
That Mr. Depp suffered persistent verbal and physical abuse at the hands of Ms. Heard. You've heard evidence from Dr. Curry and the fact witnesses at this trial that Ms. Heard's deepest fear is one of abandonment, being left by Mr. Depp. Mr. Depp's greatest crime in her mind, the fault she confronts him with time and time again, is that he splits. He leaves the fight, especially when Ms. Heard gets physical, and she couldn't stand it when he did. You heard from Ms. Heard yourselves in audio recordings how upsetting it was to her when Mr. Depp would split.
Anytime anything goes wrong, you split. I feel like it's your first thing. And it's unnecessary. It's not always you're splitting because there's blows or because there's yelling or anything. You split most times when I'm still speaking in this volume and nothing has been thrown or hit or anything.
You saw the barrage of text messages she would send when he would leave, calling him a monster for doing so. You heard from witnesses like Travis McGivern, Tara Roberts, and Debbie Lloyd that Ms. Heard would claw Mr. Depp, block the elevator, throw a punch when Mr. Depp tried to separate himself from the fight. And you heard from Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's couple therapist.
So this
Dr.
is
Anderson,
Amber Heard's chart
that
right
Ms. Heard
here.
reported that when Mr. Depp would leave to de-escalate a fight, she would
From the
strike
moon.
him to
Evaluating
keep
it from the
him there,
moon. Vedic
because she would
Astrology.
rather be in a fight than have him leave. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him, including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely
Make sure you
injuring
like and
his
subscribe
finger,
if you haven't
and then
already.
put a cigarette out on his face. You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will, just a month after getting married. When her husband was seriously injured and bleeding from a partially amputated finger, what did Ms. Heard do? She pursued him. She kept coming after him, because that's what she does. She wouldn't stop.
It's not to get you mad. It's just to get out of a bad situation that's happening before it gets worse. In Australia, when we had the big fight where I lost the tip of my finger, at least 5 bathrooms and 2 bedrooms I went to
avoid talking to me, to
To
avoid
escape
working
the-
out. That's
to
the
escape
problem.
the fight.
You don't escape the fight. You escape the solution.
No.
You escape the solution. You
No.
escape figuring it out. We cannot work it out if you run away to the bathroom every time.
You heard Mr. Depp testify. He went through something like a nervous breakdown that day. And he wrote a lot of things on mirrors and other places. Again, what did Ms. Heard do as her husband was bleeding from serious injury? She wrote snarky messages right back to him. She denied it under oath to you, but the evidence you saw speaks for itself. You heard from Mr. Depp's security, Sean Bett, who was aware of constant arguing and bickering. He witnessed Ms. Heard calling Mr. Depp names. Fat ass. Fuck you, Johnny. Mr. Bett testified that he saw and documented injuries on Mr. Depp. A swollen eyelid in March of 2015, cuts on his nose, scratch marks on his chin in December of 2015. And you heard from Travis McGivern, who testified that Ms. Heard called Mr. Depp names like washed up, fucking cunt, and worst of all, a fucking deadbeat dad.
Yikes.
Ms. Heard would take the low blows and hit him where it hurts, his children. Mr. McGivern told you that on March 23rd, 2015, Ms. Heard threw things at Mr. Depp, spat at him, and ultimately punched him in the face, leaving him with a shiner. You heard testimony from Malcolm Connolly, another security member, who testified he saw Ms. Heard throw things at Mr. Depp, a cigarette lighter on a plane, a soda can from upstairs at the Eastern Columbia building. He never saw marks on Ms. Heard, but he saw marks on Mr. Depp. Scratches, bruises on his left eye, scratches on his left ear. And he took pictures documenting injuries like this one. You also heard from Tara Roberts, a manager at Mr. Depp's Island, who witnessed Ms. Heard telling Mr. Depp that he was washed up and would die fat and lonely.
Wow.
You also heard from Ms. Roberts that she witnessed Ms. Heard clawing and grabbing at Mr. Depp, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back to her, and Mr. Depp had a visible injury to his nose on that occasion. Most importantly, you heard from Ms. Heard yourselves on multiple audio recordings admitting to being physically violent with Mr. Depp. You heard Ms. Heard admit to hitting Mr. Depp.
And then you fucking clock me.
I remember hating you as a response to the door thing. And I'm really sorry about hitting you with the door, or hitting your head. I did not mean to, nor...
You didn't mean to hit me in the head with the door, but you meant to
I did
punch me in the jaw.
I meant to hit you, and I did not do this thing with the door. I do remember, I did mean to hit you.
So that you didn't mean.
The door? No, God, no, I didn't.
For punching me in the jaw.
I didn't. Okay, I'm sorry I hit you. I did mean to hit you, but it was in response. I just reacted.
Peace to everybody in the chat.
My foot. I just reacted.
As soon as we get a break, we're gonna
You heard her admit it again and claim
go into
Mr.
some
Depp was a
astrological
baby for
correlations.
complaining about the abuse.
And I watched you lie, and then
I didn't punch you, by the way. I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. It was not punching you. Babe, you're
Make sure
not
y'all like the
punched.
video.
Don't tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You know, you've been in a lot of fights. You've been around a long time. I know. Yeah.
No, when you fucking have a close
You
face.
didn't get punched. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not fucking deck you. I fucking was hitting you. I don't know what the motion of my actual hand was, but you're fine. I did not hurt you. I did not punch you. I was hitting you.
How are you?
What am I supposed to do? Do this? I'm not sitting here bitching about it, am I? You are. That's the difference between me and you. You're a fucking baby.
Yikes.
You are such a baby. Grow the fuck up,
Did you start
Johnny.
physical fights?
I did start a physical
Yeah,
fight.
you did, so I had
Because-
to get the fuck out of there.
Yes, you did. So you did the right thing, the big thing. You know what? You're admirable.
Take a minute to really think about what you just heard there. Quote, I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. I was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched. Imagine that was Mr. Depp saying that to Miss Heard on that recording. Let's play one more.
That fake laugh. That fake laugh is too much to take.
No, I'm sure she's.
That fake laugh is so disgusting.
I'm sure she's great.
I'm thinking that you can give me some
No.
of the best performances in the
No,
fucking
you're
trash.
right. I don't. It's all about performance.
It's about performance in you. No, I'm right. I don't regret. I don't regret.
Oh, what else?
I
What
don't
else that you do? Oh, come on.
don't
Fever.
I
Come
don't
on.
regret.
Lay it on me. What else? What else other things do you want to add?
Can't talk
You
to you when you
fucking
sound
lying
like
piece of
Bobby
shit.
Bear.
What? Oh,
Like
no,
a
I
kid
want to
show.
know.
Yeah,
I want
Get out your Ubers out.
I'm kind of waiting. You go get it.
Yeah, I'll be in the
Wait, is there no other place for you to run in your 1,500 houses to go run? Come on, go be a real married man. Go deal with your shit the way that a man does. Go run to the next house. Every man does.
Yeah.
Go.
Go.
Run away.
This is the real Miss Heard, the one in the audio recordings, not the one you saw in this courtroom. What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties, is Mr. Depp ever admitting to hitting, punching, or kicking Miss Heard. You didn't hear it. It doesn't exist. It didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia and the Bahamas, you never heard Ms. Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault. Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol, Ms. Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong.
Look at the face.
But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings. As much as Ms. Heard and her lawyers have tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Ms. Heard that repeatedly admits to violence. By April and May of 2016, Mr. Depp had reached his limit. His mother was dying. His finances were a mess. And when he showed up late to Ms. Heard's 30th birthday party, because a meeting with his new business manager, Edward White, had gone late, Ms. Heard, of course, was not understanding. She was furious. You heard from Mr. Depp, both in this courtroom and on audio recordings, that Ms. Heard punched him that evening. He left with Travis McGivern, and the next morning he learned that someone had left feces on his bed. Ms. Heard denies responsibility, but she admitted to the prank to Starling Jenkins. You heard him testify to that effect. For almost a month after that, they didn't see each other. And you heard from Mr. Depp that when his mother died on May 20th, 2016, he resolved to leave Ms. Heard. He was done. And when Ms. Heard learned that Mr. Depp was done, that she was really losing him, she went on the attack. She filed for divorce before Mr. Depp could. Then, as you heard from Mr. Depp's divorce lawyer, Laura Wasser, Ms. Heard sent a letter demanding financial support. And when her demands weren't met, Ms. Heard struck a blow against Mr. Depp that was more damaging than any physical blow she had ever landed. When she walked into court 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, to get a domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp, she did so in front of paparazzi with a mark on her face. The evidence presented at this trial demonstrates that Ms. Heard didn't just want a divorce. She wanted to ruin him. Ms. Heard denied alerting TMZ to the TRO filing in this courtroom. But you heard testimony from Morgan Tremaine that TMZ knew to go to the courthouse, knew what side of her face the alleged bruise was on, and that Ms. Heard would pause. She would pause for paparazzi, who got the photos that ended up splashed across newspapers and magazines. Ms. Heard testified that she did not personally give photographs of her apparent injuries to People magazine. But somehow, these pictures that she took and maintained on her devices ended up on the cover of People magazine 1 month later. In the end, she walked away with $7 million without any tax liabilities, which she said she was donating to 2 charities, the ACLU and the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. The ACLU, they got less than $1 million from her. And the Children's Hospital, they got $250,000. But that didn't stop Ms. Heard from telling the world that she donated everything, because remember, she wanted nothing. And she had donated everything. The word donated. And that didn't stop her from testifying under the penalty of perjury that she had donated it. Ms. Heard tried to tell you that pledge and donate mean the same thing. She claims she hasn't given the money because she was sued, but you've heard uncontested evidence that she had the money for 13 months prior to this lawsuit being commenced by Mr. Depp. She had all the money and had month after month after month to fulfill her pledge and actually donate the money. But she didn't. She also told you that she never fulfilled the pledge because Mr. Depp sued her for defamation. That's a blatant lie. It was Ms. Heard who fired the first shot after the divorce was finalized, when she sought to initiate an arbitration against Mr. Depp for defamation 3 months before the op-ed was even published, and 6 months before Mr. Depp filed this lawsuit. Not only does this contradict Ms. Heard's excuse for not making donations, it contradicts her narrative that she just wants to move on with her life, that she just wants Mr. Depp to leave her alone. Lies. That is Ms. Heard's narrative. Lies upon lies.
So, Ra,
Yes,
Why
sir.
they-
And actually were all kinds of accusations flying.
they got a lot of stuff going on. What do you think so far? I mean, looking at Amber Heard's chart.
Chandra
your-
Mongol
what's your-
Yoga.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Chandra Mongol Yoga. Every time she does something, Chandra Mongol Yoga.
Explain to the folks what a Chandra Mangala Yoga is. And for y'all,
Chandra
you know,
Mongol Yoga is when you got the moon in a specific placement, or Mars in a specific placement from the moon. So she has, as we can see here in the chart, she's got the moon in Virgo, right? And we use the moon or Chandra as the ascendant. And you count from that moon 4 houses away, Mars is placed in Sagittarius. And so we can clearly see that this individual does have a Chandra Mangal Yoga when Mars is in the first, fourth, seventh, or 10th house, right? Then this is what is produced. And, men and women both are affected by this particular yoga. But again, when we look at charts and things like this, we got to assess if our chart is a male chart or if it's a female chart. And a
Right.
female chart is going to have more impact on that moon because she is the embodiment of that moon, the femininity, the internal side that the moon produces, right? When Mars is in that position, it's going to inflame, inflate, create mean streaks, create harshness, create a overall just non-caring disposition in that particular woman's chart. And so this is what we're seeing here at play. That's why I continuously say Chandra Mongol Yoga, right, from this position. So it's evident.
It's kind of like the quintessential kind of depiction of what we see women being pushed to this day. Like women who have this Chandra Mangala Yoga is like the quintessential, like the boss chick, the ambitious woman. She accomplishes a lot. She gets what she, she kind of almost, she attains what she, what she wants to go after and stuff like that. But, in previous episodes and in this episode, and, in other ones and whatnot, we've discovered that it also creates issues in relationships and whatnot. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, very well stated. They're very successful in the outer world, right?
Right.
In the inner world, there's a lot of commotion and tumultuousness. So, it goes both ways, definitely. But, it's just one of those things that it has to play itself out. And what better way to play itself out in a marriage to someone that's a prominent figure, so the world can see, right, and be on display. That can be on display so that we can understand the context of these particular placements. My good brother Raab is saying that he has Rahu transiting to Aries in the 8th from the moon.
She has
Absolutely.
a nodal return right now. What do you think the
words right out of my
significance
mouth, King?
Right.
He's having a nodal return, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, that Rahu is conjunct an exalted sun, so that's also going to further inflate the ego, right? Give some what we call narcissistic qualities, right? And definitely push her over the edge in the sense of her individualism and her balance between, what is internally, mentally, and emotionally correct versus what is displayed, what she's performing, and how she's producing this kind of show, right? Because the sun is a planet that produces performances. So, excellent comment there, Rob.
Indeed. We're going to tune back in for a second to see where we're at, and then we'll give some commentary on Johnny's chart in a second. Let's see what they're talking about right now.
Sure, Ms. Heard can point to text messages where Mr. Depp is apologizing to her, but never for violence. Ms. Heard's counsel showed you Defendant's Exhibit 325, where Mr. Depp says sorry for, quote, my behavior. I'm a fucking savage. But this is not an apology for physical violence. It's an apology for the, quote, these heinous, slinging insults. Mr. Depp is apologizing for the words he used. Unlike Ms. Heard, who you heard apologizing for physical violence in multiple audio recordings, you have never heard that from Mr. Depp because he never used physical violence against Ms. Heard. Ms. Heard told you that Mr. Depp started abusing her right from the very beginning of her relationship, starting at the beginning of 2012. But she has repeatedly testified under oath differently to having spent a year of bliss with Mr. Depp before he ever laid a hand on her. And now, in this courtroom, she has suddenly erased an entire year of magic. She wants you to believe that instead of hitting her After a year of magic, Mr. Depp was hitting her immediately. The good times she has testified to about repeatedly in the past apparently never happened. And with the good times erased, Ms. Heard wants you to believe that she gave Mr. Depp a big knife that said, hasta la muerte, until death, to the man who supposedly would get drunk and high and beat her. Ms. Heard admitted to you during this trial that Mr. Depp always wears big, chunky rings on every finger. According to her, he was wearing these rings when he'd slap her, hit her, punch her in the face. But you have not seen a single photograph that reflects the serious injuries Ms. Heard would have sustained if this was true. Not one. Ms. Heard testified to an incident in March 2013 when Mr. Depp supposedly hit her multiple times in the face while wearing rings. And this is what her face looked like afterwards. Ms. Heard testified to an incident in Russia where she claims Mr. Depp whacked her in the face and gave her a bloody nose. She didn't take pictures of her bloody nose, but her photograph was taken on that trip, and this is what she looked like.
Look at this.
Those rings must be
Ms.
pretty
Heard told
heavy.
you that there was an incident the night of the Met Gala in May 2014 when Mr. Depp supposedly whacked Ms. Heard in the face, leaving her with a red, discolored, and swollen nose that she felt was broken. Ms. Heard didn't show you any photographs of these alleged injuries, but photographs were taken of her the following night, and there were no visible injuries to Ms. Heard's face.
Yeah, I don't think you can cover up no big chunky rings punching you in the face with makeup like that.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
those rings really did damage. You can see it.
Ms. Heard testified
whiz.
that in January 2015, while she and Mr. Depp were in Tokyo, Mr. Depp knelt on her back so aggressively that she was concerned that bruises would be visible in her backless dress. Here's Ms. Heard in that backless dress.
Let me hold on. What you said here? That's the dress.
Ms. Heard testified that after an incident in December 2015, she had 2 black eyes, a broken nose, and chunks of hair missing.
The
The
face.
assault was allegedly so violent that there was blood left all over the
face.
pillows, and Mr. Depp had broken the bed frame. Pictures were taken of that bed frame. And in that picture, there appears to be a pocket knife on the bed.
Yikes.
And that picture fails to capture the bloody pillows.
So Rob, real quick, right? While we look at this. So according to Johnny Depp's team, there's a pattern of not only, telling, of lying, but also just, over exaggerating in the lying and, almost not even caring. Like, like some people, if they lie, they'll be more discreet with it, more, sophisticated with it. But with, just from what she's talking about, right? It sounds like she is something else driving her that even overrides, her ability to be able to even, tell a good lie that's believable, non-exaggerated, that's non-exaggerated, but she can't do that. She's telling these exaggerated stories and different things like that. What do you see? And it's hard. Like I said, I wish I had a good time on Amber, but looking at it from the moon or just in general, astrologically, when you see people that over exaggerate things, without, regard of if anyone, finds them out or not. What do you see in that? Is that like a, struggle with details, or what do you see,
Mercury debilitated in opposition from the moon.
That's why, yeah.
That's instant.
And there's no cancellation in that.
None at all.
If folks, we're talking about right here, Mercury in the Vedic Astrology system is debilitated in Pisces. So this little sign right here, this is Mercury sitting in Pisces. And again, this is the chart from the moon. This is not her actual ascendant, but this is analyzing the chart from the moon. So she has moon right here, direct is opposite of Mercury in Pisces or whatnot. So you see that is that her just, missing details, overlooking details, or what, maybe give a little more insight into that.
Well, Mercury is the planet of communication, self-expression, logical reasoning, right? And because it's debilitated, right, then it, number one, creates the kind of fantasyful, right, approach to those topics. Right? Pisces is a sign of fantasy, of the imagination, of, going on escapades per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the negative sense. In the positive sense, of course, it could be spirituality, having a holistic and compassionate view of, the world around us. But because Mercury is there, right, it produces a strong propensity to go overboard, right?
Right.
And having lack or little boundaries as far as the process of self-expression is concerned. Now, when it's in opposition to the moon, right, this also creates what we call a seesaw effect, where there is a lack of consideration as to the proper approach to use these particular placements. Now, Mercury in Pisces can produce positive things in the sense of her acting skills, right?
Right.
In the sense of her portrayal of characters, in the sense of, having a thought process that can be oriented around seeing things from a different perspective. But in this case, right, because Mars is also squared the moon, right? Then Mars is also squared Mercury, excuse me.
Yeah.
Mars is also squared Mercury. And Mars plays the interfacer between the moon and Mercury, meaning it's the one that kind of says, hey, if you do this, right, come from this perspective. This also can create an exaggeration of details. So this is where we're seeing that particular manifestation of those behavior patterns.
Indeed. To the signs. Let's go tune in to the courtroom real quick and see where they're at.
Could have been caused exactly as he described. And interestingly, you heard from Christina Sexton that Ms. Heard told her that Mr. Depp injured his finger while swinging a bottle around. Not smashing a phone, as Ms. Heard surmised in this courtroom, but swinging a bottle around. You also heard from Ms. Sexton that Ms. Heard first told her about the bottle rape in Australia while Ms. Sexton was at Ms. Heard's home, meeting with her lawyers, the day before Ms. Sexton was scheduled to be deposed in this case. The evidence presented at this trial shows that this is not the only time that Ms. Heard disclosed a sexual assault at a convenient time for purposes of litigation she's involved in. The first time Ms. Heard claimed that Mr. Depp sexually assaulted her in the Bahamas in December 2015 was after Tara Roberts, the manager of Mr. Depp's island, submitted a sworn statement in the UK action describing the incident she testified to in this courtroom, where Ms. Heard chased Mr. Depp out of the house, was yelling and then pleading with Mr. Depp to stay while clawing at his hair and clothes, and left Mr. Depp with an injury to his face. That's the first time she disclosed it, after there was contrary evidence. Ms. Heard testified about another incident just 2 weeks after the events in Australia, where Mr. Depp supposedly attacked Ms. Heard and almost pushed her sister Whitney down the stairs. Whitney is the only witness that you heard from that backs up Ms. Heard's version of events. She's it. And the only witness, other than Ms. Heard, who claims to have seen Mr. Depp physically attack Ms. Heard. But just like Ms. Heard's version of the events in Australia, her testimony about the staircase incident and that of her sister Whitney's just doesn't square up with the other evidence in this trial. Their testimony is contradicted by the testimony of Travis McGivern and Debbie Lloyd, who were there that night. Ms. Heard and Whitney testified that Mr. Depp threw a Red Bull can that hit or almost hit Ms. Lloyd. Ms. Lloyd testified that never happened. Mr. McGivern testified that it was Ms. Heard who threw a can at Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard testified that Whitney was between her and Mr. Depp when she punched him. Mr. McGivern testified that he was the one between Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp when Ms. Heard punched Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard testified that Mr. Depp was able to get his hands in her hair, yank her, and then hit her in the face with the cast he had on. But you heard from Ms. Lloyd and Dr. Colbert, Mr. Depp's medical doctor, who treated Mr. Depp's finger injury, that Mr. Depp's finger was in a delicate state. He had a pin in his finger, a skin graft, and a soft cast that immobilized Mr. Depp's two middle fingers. And tellingly, the only picture of an injury from this incident is of Mr. Depp with a shiner. And then we have May 21st, 2016. Ms. Heard testified that Mr. Depp threw a phone at her face, causing a visible injury. Ms. Heard has shown you pictures she claims to show this injury. But these photographs are not to be trusted. You heard from Mr. Neumeister that like many of the photographs Ms. Heard has presented in this case, these photos were stored in a photo editing application. And these photos show signs of manipulation. These two photographs were taken at the exact same time and have the exact same file name. But they are visually different. One shows significantly more redness on Ms. Heard's face than the other, which doesn't show any injury at all. Ms. Heard testified that the difference is explained by turning on a light. But there is no way Ms. Heard could have taken a picture, turned on a light, and then taken another picture with every hair in the exact same place within the same second. It's impossible. Moreover, you heard from multiple witnesses, including Officer Melissa Sines, Officer Tyler Haddon, and Officer William Gatlin, Isaac Baruch, Alejandro Romero, who saw Ms. Heard on or after May 21st and saw no injuries to her face before she showed up to that courthouse with a mark on May 27th. And the very next day, after Ms. Heard walked into court with what appeared to be a bruise on her face to obtain a domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp, Ms. Heard was photographed laughing with her best friend, fresh-faced, with no bruise on her face. The mountain of evidence that Mr. Depp abused Ms. Heard is simply not there. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it. Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Ms. Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Ms. Heard got up on that stand in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse. Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely anything. It is disturbing to think that Ms. Heard would make up the horrific tales of abuse that she testified to in this courtroom. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Aaron Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colber, Morgan Knight, Morgan Tremaine, Officers Melissa Sines, Officers Tyler Haddon, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly Leonard. What Ms. Heard testified to in this courtroom is the story of far too many women. But the overwhelming evidence and weight of that evidence shows that it's not her story. It's not Ms. Heard's story. It was an act of profound cruelty, not just to Mr. Depp, but to true survivors of domestic abuse. For Ms. Heard to hold herself out as a public figure representing domestic abuse. It was false, it was defamatory, and it caused irreparable harm. And to talk more about that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and my friend, Mr. Chu.
I don't know why I'm stuttering like that a little bit.
Thank you, Camille. Logistics are not our strong suit. And thanks to all of you, truly, for taking so much time over these last several weeks to listen to Mr. Depp, to his friends, to his family,
This is
and
Johnny's
to so
lead
many
attorney.
others who have come forward physically in this courtroom, some from a very long distance, to tell you the truth, and to finally, after so many years, to correct the record. As Ms. Vasquez said, you have now come to know the real Amber Heard. Scary. We also told you at the start of this trial that you were going to come to know the real Johnny Depp, not the many characters you've seen him play so wonderfully in the movies, but the man himself. We kept that promise. You've met the real Johnny Depp. You have heard that Mr. Depp came from humble, very difficult beginnings. You have heard from Mr. Depp's big sister, who's here in the courtroom today, Christy Dombrowski, who told you how Mr. Depp grew up in a deeply troubled household with a mother, Betty Sue, who was physically abusive and mentally cruel. As Ms. Dombrowski testified, one of the names that Betty Sue called Mr. Depp when he was a little boy was One Eye, because he had to wear an eye patch for some time. His
Johnny
mother
Depp's
used to
chart
hit
here.
his father and the kids, including young Mr. Depp. And when his mother got violent, Mr. Depp would retreat and find a place to hide. Sometimes he and his sister Christy would find a place to hide together. Mr. Depp never hit back. And like his father, he either stood up and took the violence or he retreated from it. Those are habits he returned to later when he found himself in a relationship with another person who returned his love with abuse, with physical abuse. And despite this long, unhappy history with his mother, Johnny never turned his back on her. In her elder years, Mr. Depp moved his mother to California, and he moved her to Los Angeles right across the street from his house, so his two children could get to know her there. He hired nurses for his mother. He made sure to take care of her and to make her comfortable. She never went to hospice. She had the nurses make her comfortable to the day she died. And from those humble and difficult beginnings, Mr. Depp grew into one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation. Now, he came to Los Angeles with his first love as a young man, planning to be a musician. Music had been a part of his life ever since he found peace himself in his room as a young boy, when he was escaping, and he learned to play the guitar and would use it as solace. But it was an actor as his star began its rise, as he appeared in films too many to mention, including, of course, his iconic role as Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Fame came with challenges to Mr. Depp and his family. It was a strange experience for a shy young man from Kentucky to be thrust into the limelight, pursued by paparazzi, and to have even his very name become a brand. But he did his best to live a private, quiet life, and despite it all, and over the years built a reputation as a respected artist and as a decent, very well-liked man, which you've heard from many people. Mr. Depp dated major figures like Winona Ryder, Kate Moss, and Vanessa Paradis, with whom he spent 14 years together and with whom they had their children. Before Amber Heard, ladies and gentlemen, no woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raised a hand to her in his 58 years. And no other woman since Ms. Heard made that false claim back on May 27th, 2016, and repeated it in her December 2018 op-ed. Has any woman come forward since? This is Me Too without any Me Too. To the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, you heard Kate Moss 2 days ago testify. This is a woman who has never testified in any proceeding, ever. A very private person. Testified that Mr. Depp never abused her, and that Ms. Heard lied to you. And she lied to you twice when she told you.
Objection, Your Honor. That, Ms. Sure.
While they're talking to the judge real quick, Brother Wad, what are you looking at Johnny Depp's chart? Can you I mean, I see, especially as a Cancer ascendant, and this is Johnny Depp's chart, right? We do have a good time on him. So as a Cancer ascendant, being in the 6th house, conjunct K2, the things that the lawyer was talking about as far as his childhood, his upbringing, his relationship with his mother, would you say that that's consistent with what you see here in the chart?
Absolutely, with Moon in the 6th house with K2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say definitely that's something that we consider, because the Moon is also a planet of early childhood.
Right.
And without a doubt, we can see it placed with a first-rate malefic, in fact, probably the most malefic planet in the chart, K2, house of agitation, house of frustration, house of illness. So I would have to definitely concur with what is being stated around his early beginnings, without a doubt. Mars is in the 2nd house, so he probably did witness some abuse.
Right.
Did witness some altercations, did witness some heated exchanges. So, yeah, I mean, it checks out perfectly. But like you said, this is his chart, so that's a little different from Amber's, where we're using the Chandra Lagna. This is the complete package, so we can absolutely see that particular positioning. But interesting enough, he doesn't have a Chandra Mongol Yoga, does he?
It doesn't.
So yeah, it's quite quite an observation. And then Raab is definitely stating he's having some returns, simultaneous returns, which he is, in fact. He has a Saturn return and a
Right.
Jupiter. So, yeah, it's definitely a spiritual rites of passage that he's approaching during this particular year. So I'm sure once this is all said and done, he will have learned his lesson that all that glitters ain't gold.
Indeed. Indeed. Let's tune back in. We'll get some more on Johnny in a second.
Admitted repeatedly to physically abusing Mr. Depp. And I would just like to take a minute to talk about the harm to Mr. Depp and his family. You have heard from several of the people in Mr. Depp's life about the damage Ms. Heard's lies have done to him. You heard from his sister, Christy, who told you how hard it has been on his family and on her little brother personally. You heard from Mr. Depp's friend of 4 decades, and that speaks volumes about Mr. Depp. He has lifetime friends who appear for him. Mr. Baruch told you how Mr. Depp and his family had been, quote, completely wrecked, unquote, by Ms. Heard's lies. You heard Mr. Depp testify that he has lost nothing less than everything because of Ms. Heard's lies. Nothing less than everything. You heard about Mr. Depp's children, Jack and Lily Rose. His children have had to hear these allegations since 2016. And then when that started to die down, they had to hear them again. This time in December 2018, this time in the Washington Post, which is a national and international publication. And Mr. Depp has had to live with the knowledge that his children will keep hearing those false rumors and statements against him. Mr. Depp has millions of fans, people who grew up watching him on 21 Jump Street, which is something you heard Miss Heard mock on one of the tapes that was played to you. Or they grew up watching him play the swashbuckling pirate Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, or Willy Wonka. Mr. Depp means something to those people, and those people mean a lot to Mr. Depp. He's a fond memory from childhood or adolescence or adulthood. And to tarnish him as an abuser is to destroy him in the eyes of many of these people who will never look at him the same way again. And because of what Ms. Heard did, and because of what she said, Mr. Depp will go to his grave knowing no matter what he does, no matter the outcome of this trial, there are people who used to look up to him who now believe that he beat a woman, which is the worst thing you can say about a man. Beyond the personal and emotional effects of Ms. Heard's lies, their impact on Mr. Depp and his family, the damage she inflicted on his reputation and career is undeniable. There's an old saying that a good reputation takes a lifetime to build, but only a second to destroy. Mr. Depp spent, in fact, a lifetime building his reputation as one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation, an iconic figure respected and liked throughout Hollywood and recognized and admired throughout the world. You heard evidence from Jack Wiggum, who was here today, Mr. Depp's agent, who explained that Mr. Depp, quote, was very well regarded and respected by peers in the artistic community, unquote. And you heard further testimony from Mr. Wiggum that Mr. Depp had a deal with Disney to play Captain Jack Sparrow in the 6th movie sequel of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise for $22.5 million. But, as Mr. Wiggum explained, all of that changed when Ms. Heard published her op-ed in December of 2018 in the Washington Post. Quoting from the testimony you heard by Mr. Wiggum, quote, after the op-ed, it was impossible to get him a studio film, which is what we normally would have focused on in that time period, unquote. Another quote, it was on the damage, the impact of this op-ed, as opposed to the other stories that you saw, the other publications. Mr. Wiggum explained why this one was so damaging. Quote, "It was a first-person account. I mean, from the victim. It's extremely impactful. You know, with respect to Johnny, it was catastrophic because it was coming from a first-person account. It was not from a journalist. It was coming from someone observing. It was from someone saying, 'This happened to me,'" unquote. You also heard from Richard Marks, an expert in the inner workings of Hollywood and the entertainment industry, who explained that the impact of Ms. Heard's allegations on Mr. Depp was devastating. Quote, "It's devastating. It's the type of claim, the Me Too claim of sexual violence, domestic abuse, that has canceled a list of actors," unquote. And for many, and Mr. Depp would agree with this, rightfully so, Me Too is an important movement, a movement that Mr. Depp supports and believes in. It's for true survivors of abuse, not Ms. Heard. True victims need protection, and true perpetrators need to face the repercussions. But as you heard in this case, Amber Heard is not a true victim, and Mr. Depp certainly is not an abuser. Again, nobody has come out of the woodwork to say, "Me Too." This is the unique and singular Me Too case where there's not a single Me Too. In fact, to the contrary, Kate Moss, who was in a romantic relationship with Mr. Depp for 3 years, which he broke off, came forward to say, no, he never pushed her down any stairs. And you heard Doug Banya, an expert in internet and social media analytics, testify to the impact that Ms. Heard's allegations had on Mr. Depp's popularity. Ms. Heard's lawyers tried to tell you that all of the damage done to Mr. Depp's career was because of his own behavior, because he was sometimes unprofessional or sometimes late to set. But that doesn't hold up. Mr. Depp has been a major figure in Hollywood for decades. Yes, Mr. Depp was late to set sometimes. But as Richard Marks testified, quote, "When you hire Johnny Depp, you get all of Johnny Depp, which includes being late," unquote. Keenan Wyatt, who has worked for decades as a sound engineer on some of Mr. Depp's films, said much the same thing. And by the way, Mr. Wyatt is not and never has been an employee of Mr. Depp. He's just worked with him on movies. Mr. Depp wasn't canceled by Hollywood because he was sometimes late to set. He was canceled because Ms. Heard falsely accused him of domestic violence and sexual violence in the pages of the Washington Post on December 18, 2018, repeating the prior lies of May 17, 2016. And as you saw at trial, Ms. Heard published the op-ed on December 18, 2018, 2 years after her public allegations of domestic abuse. Ms. Heard's publication of the op-ed coincided with the release of her major movie Aquaman that December. And it coincided as well with her announcement on Twitter that she was becoming an ACLU ambassador for women's rights. And in that op-ed, Ms. Heard repeated her false allegations against Mr. Depp. Now, she didn't mention his name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who and what Ms. Heard was talking about. Ms. Heard got on the stand and tried to tell you that the op-ed was not about Mr. Depp. She then said, well, it wasn't just about Mr. Depp. But she couldn't deny, and this was yesterday, that this was at least partly about Mr. Depp. The op-ed obviously is about Mr. Depp, and the testimony at trial proves that. You will recall testimony from the ACLU's representative, an attorney, stating that Mr. Depp's name was included in drafts of the op-ed and that they and others understood that the op-ed was about Mr. Depp. Specifically, the ACLU representative testified, among other things, quote, based on my review of prior drafts of the op-ed, I knew that they were that she was referring to Johnny Depp and the marriage, unquote. Ms. Heard's claim that the op-ed is not about Mr. Depp is just another one of her many, many lies. In fact, what you have seen time and time again through the course of this trial is that Ms. Heard lies. She lies all the time about things that are important and the things that aren't important. She just can't seem to stop. And as Ms. Vasquez said, what she routinely does is she doesn't take ownership or responsibility for anything, and she has an excuse for everything.
Yikes.
But in this courtroom, confronted with the evidence, she can't run away from her own words.
So, Teb, so I mean, a lot of things being said there. A couple things stuck out that even just, kind of confirmed the chart to me. Because I'm a Cancer ascendant as well. But Johnny Depp was born in 1963. He was almost 30 when his first major movie popped off with Edward Scissorhands. That was in 1990. He was almost 30 years old, and Pirates of the Caribbean didn't come around until he was 40 years old. That just locks his chart, especially with Saturn sitting here on that ascendant like that. And, a lot of times Cancer and Leo or whatnot, it has a, you know what I mean? You got a long path to get to where you're trying to get. And a lot of things come to you much later in life or whatnot. What do you think about that, Rob?
Yeah, you have to understand that Saturn releases his energies in a way that's very slow, and the seventh house is a house that deals with public notoriety, or not notoriety, but public acclaim, right, or the public image. And one secret of astrology is that the planets have a specific year in which they kind of do their thing, right? And that is the 35th year, which, the 36th year, but the 35th, the 36th birthday, but the 35th year of life. And so, rightfully so, I've noticed a lot of times that individuals that have Saturn as a major impact on that particular area of life, either the 7th or 10th, it can take at least until their late 30s, early 40s to really hit their kind of their goals, or kind of accomplish the deeds that they kind of set forth. So, it goes right hand in hand, especially Saturn is in the 10th house.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, definitely that would be something to consider. That Saturn ruling the 7th, which is the 10th from the 10th, produces the accumulation and the aggregation of public acclaim. It took him a while. He was on 21 Jump Street. He was a younger looking guy.
Yeah.
On 21 Jump Street. In fact, that's what the whole theme of 21 Jump Street was about, is that they were police officers that could pass for,
kids, teenagers.
For kids, right?
Yeah.
So, he paid his dues, and Saturn requires that if you're going to have any type of success or any type of fame, Saturn says, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to make you work for it. But once you work for it, once you have it, it's very difficult for someone to remove it or take it away from you. So we should see him restored to some degree after this case, especially considering the way it's being presented so far. Of course, we haven't heard the opposition, but I'm seeing a pattern that is substantial that I'm pretty sure that he may not get back to the same, perception, because as we are hearing, he's already been defamed to some degree. But at the same time, I think that from what we're seeing, what we're hearing, he's going to at least be somewhat vindicated in this process.
So with him being in that, he's in his Jupiter dasha right now, experiencing a Jupiter return. I mean, we can, I guess we can hardcore it, maybe not hardcore, but just give a little, because folks, it is a little limited because we don't have Amber Heard's actual time of birth, but just off of just a first look, what's your initial thoughts in regards to who comes out
I'm
on
seeing
top?
that Jupiter return because it hasn't even hit
Full body yet.
within that ascendant degree. See, the ascendant degree is a special kind of degree. In that we want things to pass that degree or be near that degree to really unlock the promise of the chart, right?
Right.
And it's approaching that degree. It is in the technical ninth house, but if you look, his Jupiter is exactly trying his ascendant degree, almost, to the degree, right? So
It's close.
So once that happens, right, it'll be a slow process where the truth will come out. Jupiter is the planet that reveals the truth, right? And so the truth will come out, and by the time it passes that degree, right, I believe towards the end of the year, maybe beginning of next year, all of this will kind of be water under the bridge, quote unquote, right? He'll get back to doing his thing, and that's the reward for having a moral character, having a moral disposition, doing things that are, like you said, he's not perfect, but, hitting her with rings, I don't think that's, I couldn't see that. I mean, that was an excellent makeup job if that is the case, right?
Right.
Because there was no swelling, no cuts, no bruises, if the bruises where they were covered, back wasn't damaged, So, again, Jupiter is going to definitely provide its, positive outlook. And remember, Jupiter, according to this science, removes 1,000 evils. So, you got to pay your dues. You got to go through the process. Cancers have to look deep before they leap, right? I don't think he did that, right? This is his second marriage, right?
Second, maybe even possibly. Yeah, I believe it's the second marriage. Yep.
Right. Well, if we look to the second marriage piece, look directly to the second house, then you see Mars there.
Right.
And Mars obviously would indicate acquiring a mate that has these type of fiery, aggressive, passionate, and malefic dispositions. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a second marriage.
Yeah.
Because they only mentioned one previous wife, right? And that being the case, right? Again, right? It makes sense for this to kind of go down. So, Jupiter will give its reward. And what subdasha? What subdasha is he? What bhukti is he in?
He is Venus.
Oh yeah, well that makes perfect sense, right? He's dealing with relationships, which is the sublord, right? With the second, with the Antardasha,
Right.
and Venus is in the 11th, right? It's in the third from Jupiter, right? So it's not a bad placement when you consider the outcome of the whole process. And then when he gets into Jupiter's sun, it'll still be in that same 311 position, which that translates into also being or dealing with things that are of the media, right? Because the third house deals with media type issues. So I would say that this whole process will be one that he'll get back to business and be able to get back into the process of making those movies that everyone loves.
Indeed. Let's check back into the court, see what they got going on right now. Folks, while we're putting all that together, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell to make sure you know when we're going live. And we are back.
To those 7 questions are all yes. And if you answer yes to all of those questions, which you should, we respectfully submit, you will be asked to state the amount of damages to which Mr. Depp is entitled. In the wake of the Me Too movement, movie producers know better than to cast a movie star who has been accused of domestic and sexual violence. And it is entirely within your discretion as jurors to quantify the amount of money that constitutes fair compensation for Mr. Depp's pain and humiliation inflicted by Ms. Heard's defamation. But while Mr. Depp certainly is entitled to monetary compensation, this case, at least for Mr. Depp, has never been about money. This case for Mr. Depp has never been about money. Nor is it about punishing Ms. Heard. It is about Mr. Depp's reputation and freeing him from the prison in which he has lived for the last 6 years, and it's 6 years to the day. The most important questions for Mr. Depp, the ones truly at the heart of this case, are questions 2, 3, and 4 on the verdict form. And while Tom's pulling that up, let's take question 2. Thank you. Were the statements about Mr. Depp? Yes. 2 points here. 1, when the ACLU pitched the op-ed to the Washington Post, I think you'll remember this, they pitched it as, quote, a piece by Amber Heard, who, as you know, was beaten up during her brief marriage to Johnny Depp, unquote. That's how they pitched it. 2, after the op-ed was published, news outlets, including USA Today, and you've seen that was an exhibit, characterized the op-ed as referring to Ms. Heard's allegations of abuse against Mr. Depp. So the USA Today interpreted it that way, and so did many other publications. They got exactly the implication that Ms. Heard and the ACLU intended them to have. Tom, if you would please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 409 and 411, if you could put them side by side. And this was expected. This is what they wanted. There had been a lot of press 2 years prior to the publication of the op-ed about Ms. Heard's claims of abuse against Mr. Depp when she walked into court with her publicist to obtain the domestic violence, the no-notice ex parte, meaning Mr. Depp's lawyer was not informed and he was already in New York, which he testified Ms. Heard was well aware of. You don't need a domestic violence restraining order when your husband is halfway across the continent and is heading for a European tour. On May 27, 2016, with a purported mark on her face, everyone knew exactly who and what Ms. Heard was referring to in the op-ed. She was referring to Mr. Depp. Let's take questions 2 and 3 next, if we can. Were each of the statements false? And did the statements have a defamatory implication on Mr. Depp? Again, the clear answer is yes. The statements, understood in the context of the op-ed itself and in the broader context of the press coverage of Ms. Heard walking into the court with a mark on her face to obtain a domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp in May 2016, clearly imply that Mr. Depp physically and sexually abused Ms. Heard. The overwhelming evidence that you all have heard and has come forward in this case shows that those allegations are false and despicably false. Mr. Depp did not physically abuse Ms. Heard. He did not sexually abuse Ms. Heard. You've heard audio after audio where Ms. Heard admits that she was physically abusing him. While Mr. Depp's name will be forever tarnished by these horrendous and false allegations. This case is about telling you his story and the truth about what really happened, which you've now heard. It is about restoring his lost reputation. It's about showing Mr. Depp's children, Lily Rose and Jack, that the truth is worth fighting for. It is. And it's about restoring Mr. Depp's name and standing in the community to the fullest extent that you can. And you can do something. And only you, ladies and gentlemen, can do that for him. You heard from Mr. Depp yesterday that he has been carrying these outlandish, outrageous stories on his back, pretty stoically, and living them with them for 6 years, and waiting to be able to bring his truth out. And he has told you the truth, the unvarnished truth, even truth that pretty embarrassing. He knew that was going to happen when he brought this case. You've seen the evidence in this case over 6 long weeks, which we again thank you for. That evidence shows overwhelmingly that Ms. Heard's attempt to paint herself as a heroic survivor, an innocent survivor, and Mr. Depp as a terrifying abuser are utterly false. We ask you to please return your verdict for Mr. Depp. We ask you, we implore you to give him his name, his reputation, and his career back. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a break at this time. Again, this case has not been submitted to you yet. We will continue with closing arguments when we come back, so do not discuss the case with yourselves. Don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you.
Interesting. So that's the Johnny Depp's team, you know, delivering their closing arguments. I don't know. What do you think? You know, I mean, we talked about Amber Heard a little bit, you know, I mean, just as far as just looking at their two charts and different things like that. Does it look like, I mean, you know, where are you at?
Yeah. Angelique was mentioning that she is 36 years old, right?
Right.
And talking about how Saturn releases its portents at these specific ages. Her Saturn's in Scorpio, which is quite honestly, it's no joke. Right? Serious energy, right? And unless the chart is, you know, situated in such that Jupiter has a strong impact on Saturn, we notice sometimes that this is some of the things that come out is that they can be violent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They can be sadistic, right? They can be quite harsh, mean, downright even cantankerous. And you know, the 36th year of life, or the 35th year up to the 36th birthday, is when we will see something in life that will present itself to let the person know this is how you are to be dealing with your karma, because Saturn is that planet quintessentially karma other than the nodes. And so it just makes perfect sense for, you know, that helplessness, that powerlessness, that inability to effectuate your will based on, you know, things that deal with circumstances that are causing you to change your behavior would be released at this point in time in her life. So, you know, it's one of those things that she's got to go through to really face the music and to understand that you can't control people. You can't control behavior. You can't, you know, only the behavior you have control over is your own behavior.
Your own. Right.
And, she's, you know, I don't want to say lacking in that department, but, you know, and it's strange because when I watched Aquaman, I just got this energy about her, like she's something else, right? I don't know how I got it. I don't know if it was, you know, psychic kind of thing, but it just, I got this vibe that she's a handful, right? She's a handful. And you know, strange, I didn't even know that was Johnny Depp's wife, or when the case even started. I didn't even put the two together. So
Right.
before this even came about, I was already like looking at this or like her from that perspective. Like she's a lot, just from her presence on screen. So, I mean, that Saturn in Scorpio is definitely calling out those karmic lessons at this point in time in their life.
Indeed, indeed. And once again, shout out to everybody that's in the chat and whatnot. Shout out to
Please,
y'all.
everybody.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's get some likes in here or whatnot. Share this with some people and stuff like that or whatnot, because we're offering a different perspective, Speaking of that though, to even get, this far, she got some talent. She got some talent in some key places or whatnot, As far as just, looking at it from the moon, what's some things that you see that's really working for her in this chart?
Ninth from Venus is in the ninth from the moon.
Right.
Gives her knowledge of, how to really create a emotional, believable emotional presentation. Right.
Yeah.
That ninth from the moon gives her knowledge and emotional kind of intuition that gives her the ability to, do what she does. And she's a good actress. I mean, she makes it believable.
Right.
Johnny Depp as well. I mean, they're both great actors, and it makes sense for two actors to, coalesce. And interestingly enough, right, their Venuses are conjunct. Right?
It is. So let's yep, they're almost within a degree of each other.
So, instant attraction, instant
Right.
affinity towards their love styles and how they would express themselves in the area of relationships. So, it makes perfect sense. But what we do know is that her Venus is combust with his Venus, which is combust. And is Venus combust? Wait a minute. It may not be combust. No. Actually, his Venus isn't combust, is it?
It's pretty far away. I mean, it's 20, about 20,
it's not combust,
22
actually.
degrees away. Yeah.
Nope, it's not combust. My apologies, right? Her Venus is conjunct his Mercury within less than a degree. So, it just makes sense for them to be able to get along or have that strong attraction anyways. Not maybe not getting along, but, she definitely has the skill set to do her thing on the scene, on the big scene, and the little big screen and little screen as well. But, that doesn't make you a person that produces any type of moral compass, right? And I've yet to watch Aquaman. I don't think I want to anymore. Yeah,
I haven't seen it either yet.
You haven't seen it yet either?
No.
I'm just saying.
I'm gonna tell you why I didn't watch it. The reason why I didn't watch it was because I used to watch. You remember a show called what's it called with Entourage, right?
No,
Entourage. It was like early 2000s. It was an HBO series called Entourage, or whatnot, about basically like a movie star from. I think they were from Queens. They was from Queens, and like the young kind of handsome one or whatever. He gets in the movie business, and they move out to LA. He brings all his brothers and his manager from New York with him and stuff like that. And it's just basically like his escapades going through Hollywood and stuff like that. And one of the big star roles that he had, and it was a lot of controversy around that, was him playing Aquaman, I believe. You understand what I'm saying? He was playing Aquaman in it. And I don't know, just from when I saw the actual movie Aquaman, I just wasn't interested in seeing it, because I guess the series kind of put me off of Aquaman. At the point, I was just like, this ain't no real, I just didn't take it serious. Let's put it that way. It's not that I just didn't take it serious just because of, watching the Entourage series or whatnot. Might be weird, but I don't know. That's why I hadn't watched it yet, because I feel like I've seen it already.
No, I got you, man. I got you. No,
Yeah.
it's just I watched it so that I could see. I mean, I'm a comic book fan, so kind of nerdy in that regard. But when I watched the movie, she just came off very just a hidden kind of snippiness, like this kind of just hidden. I'm not gonna say arrogance, but hidden. Like if she was really around you, she would, have this kind of uh, s- like sly kind of like I hit you where you don't see me coming type of energy, and
Right.
that's what I think he's experiencing in his full bloom now. Like that energy comes off as very just overboard, maybe, right? Is a
Right.
better way of stating it. But in her chart, she does have Venus in opposition to Saturn. And that a lot of times will create broken hearted individuals, right? Especially because of the axis, right? That Saturn's in Scorpio and Venus is in Taurus. So it can create a loneliness in relationships, not feeling adequately that love return, because Saturn is a planet of coldness, right? And Venus is the planet of affection. And when they're in opposition, they have this kind of, wanting to integrate or wanting to create balance, where they feel the lack or feel that deficit in that particular placement. So, you know, um, it's all over her chart. But she does have a skill set from that moon being in the ninth, excuse me, Venus being in the ninth house from the moon. Moon is also considered a planet for acting as well. So, she's got skills, that's no doubt. But those skills are on screen and definitely not behind the scenes.
Indeed, indeed. One interesting thing from the case, and I know this is kind of impromptu, Ross. So, she was compared to a couple of actors in regards to how her team would justify her compensation, or her countersuit rather. And one of the actors that she was compared to was Zendaya, which is the lead actor from the show Euphoria, but she was on Disney, all types of stuff growing up or whatnot. And this is her chart. This is a solid time of birth for her or whatnot. Good rating, good source or whatnot. Just perusing this particular actor's chart, because the Johnny Depp's team made a point to basically going down her, also Jason Momoa, Aquaman or whatnot. We don't have a good time on him. I could probably pull it up from the moon or whatnot, but what do you see maybe some key differences? And if if you want to, I'll just let you do your thing with it or whatnot. But in regards to creative talent, acting talent, career success, do you see any stark differences? Just in general.
Oh, this is the young
placement-wise and
lady,
everything.
is Zendaya?
Yeah,
Is she the one was in Spider-Man?
I believe so. Yeah. I think. Yeah, let's see.
Is that
I
her?
think she.
The little thin, she's a thinner kind
Yeah, she
of
was in
mixed.
Spider-Man.
That's
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Wow, that's her chart. Interesting. Um, just off the rip, and he said they've been compared. Is that what you're saying?
So, in response to Johnny Depp's defamation suit, her team has filed a countersuit. So, a countersuit, I think, of like $100 million, right? And basically, of the other people that were in Aquaman, they compared Amber Heard to some of the other actors in the movie and their career trajectory, and they utilized that to try to justify her countersuit, how much she could be paid, because their argument is that because of the suit and the things that Johnny Depp's team is accusing her of, has blocked her from her the success that she would otherwise be receiving compared to her counterparts. All right, and then Johnny Depp's team made the argument,
I
that
see what you're saying.
these people are not, they're not good comparable. They're not good comparisons because their careers are nowhere near close to each other, or whatnot. And including, Zendaya, she was a child star, right?
Right.
She's in Disney, different things like that. So just, any regards to Dasha sequence and different
her
things.
son
Like,
Dasha.
yeah. Right.
Her son Dasha. Sun is in the 5th from the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's gonna definitely bring her to a level of, notoriety. I mean, not notoriety, but a level of prominence. Right. Even though it's in the 8th house, it rules the 8th. It's in Purva Falguni, which is ruled by Venus. Right. That definitely is gonna be a kicker. She was in the Venus Dasha prior to 2016.
She got that Parivatan.
Yeah, she definitely does have that as well. So that would
Cancels that
lend to
debilitation.
reducing a lot of that malefic Chandramangal Yoga energy, even though it's still present. Right?
She's probably a hard cookie too.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's got Venus. She got Venus conjunct Mars, right? And that creates a heaping load of passion and falling in and out of love with individuals. It is conditionally on the cusp of Cancer, but it's still in Cancer.
Right.
But her ascendant lord is in the 3rd house, which, interestingly enough, right, she's had some success not only because of that, but because of transits as well. Saturn has been in its position, for the last 2 years, so she's definitely kind of gotten some momentum from that, picking up the pace and doing what it's supposed to do. So interesting. I didn't know. I didn't even know she had a chart out there, but I've always kind of wondered because she has a younger presence to me. She's considerably to me. She seems young, 96. So
Right.
she's not quite hit her peak, but she's played some interesting roles. She's got that Mercury in the 9th house with Rahu in its own sign and exaltation. So just as an individual, it gives her a skill set that she can present something very believable as well. But the 10th lord is in the 10th house from itself, right? That also will present a strong career, right, in acting, right? Venus aspects the ascendant, right? The 10th lord aspects the ascendant. But her relationships are definitely ones that she falls deeply in love because Venus is in the sign of emotion, so is mine. But you can get out of there quick too.
Right.
The passion, the lust, the intimacy, the chemistry, all those things are there. But I don't know if this is true. I thought, kind of followed a little bit, but I think she was in a relationship with the fella that was in the Spider-Man she was in, right? The little young guy. And then she
Not
ended
sure.
up with another Spider-Man. One of the other Spider-Man characters or actors that was in the same movie in the most recent Spider-Man. So I don't know if that's true, right? But it wouldn't be surprising per se, because Cancer and Mars and Venus, when they're together, it can create that kind of instant attraction and instant repulsion type energy.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, Sun Dasha definitely will do it, because it is in the fifth from the moon. She's going to feel that success. Fifth house is acting, fifth house is performance, fifth house is the ability to make things um, uh, believe, not even to say just believable, but to produce a high level of skill in regards to being on the screen. So that makes perfect sense. And so that's where her dashas are kicking in. It's also called a Sarala Yoga, and Sarala yogas are very powerful yogas, right? Gives you longevity, provided there's nothing that is encumbering that particular position. Because Michael Jackson has it as well, but he has some other things that change the nature of that yoga.
Right.
But yeah, no, she definitely has a lot of power. Eighth houses, that kind of um, energy that comes from a deep, deep rooted place. And so the Sun Dasha will produce, success, because it is a powerful yoga. It's not a weak yoga. It's well placed. It's 16 degrees, which is little over, 15. Her ascendant degree is 13 degrees. So that's going to still also have a lot of impact at this time of life. And she's about to run the course of it. She's almost done with that yoga. I mean that dasha, and she will soon enter the moon dasha
Right.
as of 2020, as of this year, in fact, right?
Yeah.
You'll
Next
notice
month.
that
I mean,
dashas
July.
will create the momentum all the way up until the very end to give you the fullness of it, and then she's going to switch over into a new dasha towards, in fact, in about 2 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little over a month and a half, she's
Less than
going to
that,
change.
yeah. About 40 days, something like that.
Yeah, and so it's going to be an interesting next 10 years for her, right?
Right.
Because that moon is going to kind of bring more of that, you know, seventh house energy, where she's now going to really probably get married, have a relationship, having, being a mother, right? May see her having some children here soon. So, that can change your career, right? And that is in opposition to the 10th house, right? So, having that balance of career, home life type energy is going to be one of challenge for her, because Moon um, is in the 10th from the seventh lord, right?
Right.
Moon is also in uh, Baharani, which is Venus's nakshatra. So, it's gonna be, where she will have to find that kind of special place for herself to be able to do what she does on screen, and to be able to mother and be a wife and be, supporting, loving mate off screen. So that's what we're gonna see from her in the next few years to come.
Indeed, indeed.
Tom Holland,
Speak.
she did say it. Yeah, Tom Holland, right? Now is Tom Holland no, Tom Holland is the guy that is the star of the most recent Spider-Man series. You're right. But there was some conjecture or propaganda that she was actually with the other Spider-Man that was he's the second Spider-Man. There's three Spider-Mans. There's the first one, which is kind of the original. The second one, which is with the one that had Jamie using the movie with Jamie Foxx, right? And played that. And then, of course, this is the third one now, which is, Tom Holland. So she was with Tom Holland, and then they had a big picture and big to do about her being with the other Spider-Man. So just kind of segue or kind of piggyback that, interestingly enough, that may be the case that she switched tunes and has moved into another spider role, right, behind the scenes. So, um, interesting stuff. But yeah, thank you for that. His name is Tom Holland. Yeah.
So, also right here, I got Jason Momoa. This is just a moon chart because he don't have a time of birth or whatnot. That's the other actor that she was compared to in regards to similar careers or career trajectory. Now, let me ask you a question before we even go there. And it's hard to do. It really is hard to do. I wish I had a good time on Mrs. Heard or whatnot. What do you? I mean, and again, I understand it's a strange thing to do from the moon alone, and there's some other things we could look at. But after this, right? We talked about Johnny after this point. You know, he has some things that probably work in his favor. From moon, and folks, we're not saying that this is 100%. This is where it's at because we're limited with our information. But just from the moon, what do you see after this situation and moving to where she's going? Where do you see her kind of, her trajectory after this point? I mean, because there's a couple ways people kind of go. I mean, you go to this, and let's say, if all, indicators are correct, and she loses this case, right? Some people go and they double down. I mean, I definitely see her doubling down for sure, but how will the public perceive it? Will they forgive her and she be able to move on? Or will it really be something that kind of,
you
carries with her?
Just because the way things are happening, in the sense that, outside of the chart, right?
Right.
You see a lot of these kind of Me Tooers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Me Too movement kind of fallouts that it kind of the accusers, it doesn't, nothing really happens. Oh yeah, there's some truth in there. Some kind of way she was done in a way that was malicious, and only that person can understand what happened to them and that kind of thing. So nothing really happens to these kind of false accusations or extravagant outcomes. Nothing really happens.
Right.
She'll probably go back, take a minute to assess, pick her face up off the floor, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because Rahu is creating the nodal return. And we still have until October 31st of next year for it to run its course. So, she'll pick her face up, her ego will be bruised, right? Because it's too big right now. So, you could see the demeanor on her face. I'm sorry. She's got that face to where she's like, yeah, like just can't touch me. Like just the arrogance is exuding from her pores.
Oh, you're
And
really
so
gonna?
she'll have to pick her face up, right?
Right.
She'll have to put her ego back together because Rahu inflates and then he blows it up just like a balloon, right?
Yeah.
Rahu does not expand. No, don't let anyone tell you that in astrology. Rahu does not expand. He inflates. He spreads. Right?
Yeah.
And when you spread, you get spread too thin, right? When you inflate, you get too big, right? Then it pops you. And then the opposite effect is Ketu, isn't it? Right?
Absolutely.
So these kind of, when Rahu can turn into Ketu, Ketu can even turn into Rahu. They can invert kind of same, Ketu is a flag. He can run you up the flagpole, right, and drop you down like one of those roller coaster rides where you get all the way to the top, right, and drop, in an instant. So they can kind of have the similar effects, but one is faster and one is slower. Rahu is slower because it acts like Saturn. Ketu is faster because it acts like Mars.
Right.
So, you can see that she will have to pick her face up, dust her shoulders off, soothe her ego, right? Um, let everyone know, she's come back from this. And that'll take about a year, maybe a little over a year and a half. Jupiter will move into the seventh from the moon, right? It'll, she'll self soothe, right? Maybe a little extras, a couple drinks, because Mercury is there. So, Jupiter, conjuncting Mercury in debilitation, will also kind of have an extravagant or an expanding type of process. She'll try to escape, right, from this whole apparatus because of the Piscean disposition that Mercury is in. And Pisces is also the sign of intoxicants, right? So she may go that approach as well. Saturn, over the course of the next year will move and conjunct her Jupiter, which will squeeze and kind of pressurize the realization of, what she's done, because Jupiter is the planet of knowledge. So, this is what we can expect. It'll be in the sixth from the moon. So, her feelings will be also, again, hurt, because the sixth from the moon shows where you feel antagonized or feel frustrated. It'll also be squaring the Saturn, right, that she has in the third house, right?
Right.
I mean, third from the moon, excuse me. But it will square Saturn. Saturn squares, Saturn oppositions are major turn points as far as your destiny is concerned. So, we'll see her, kind of frustrated and, have to rebuild her kind of, I don't know, just say career, because career's not going to be just completely demolished, but she herself will not feel the same. She'll feel dejected. She'll feel frustrated. And as we kind of know, Saturn in Scorpio makes you feel helpless. It makes you feel like you have no control. And so she'll have to kind of understand that, no, you really don't. But the little control that you do have, when you abuse or kind of misalign other people, then you have to, reap the consequences from those actions.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Big up to that. All right, so let's listen to the opposing closing statements for a little bit of whatnot before we get there. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, and let's go back to the court.
Decide, should someone be able to write an article like that in the United States of America without being sued successfully, without having to go through the hell that Ms. Heard has gone through? So let's talk about that. And to do that, we get to explain a bit more about the law that you have to follow. This is the op-ed piece. I'm not going to read it to you again. You heard me read it to you in opening statements. And I would urge you, when you're in the deliberation room, read it. Read it again. And I know we focused on it, here and there over the course of the trial, but the vast majority of this trial has not focused on these words, on this piece. This is obviously the paper edition. There's the online edition as well. Now we get a chance to discuss with you exactly what you have to find about this article. Let's try this again. This is one of the jury instructions that you'll get. And I've been so looking forward to being able to actually explain to you, as the judge read all the instructions to you this morning, and I know it was a lot, but we've been looking forward to being able to explain to you what you're here to decide. Because I imagine for some of the case, it's been kind of unclear. What are you being asked to decide? These are the things that you have to find, and you have to answer yes. As Mr. Chu said, you have to answer yes to all of them in order to find in favor of Mr. Depp. So you have to find that the statement was about Mr. Depp, and you can decide that in the context of the article. And I'll get to the arguments that Mr. Depp raises on that in a minute. You also have to find that the statement is false. And we're going to look at the statements here. We're going to look at each of the three statements. And in order to win his claim, Mr. Depp has to prove every single element. And there's a concept in the jury instructions that you really didn't hear from Mr. Depp's side this morning, but you've all heard it, I'm sure, outside the courtroom, which is burden of proof. It is Mr. Depp's burden to prove each and every one of these elements. If he cannot, Ms. Heard wins. If he cannot prove each and every one of these elements under the burden of proof that's applicable, Ms. Heard wins. And there's two different burdens of proof that we'll get to. For all of them except number 7, the burden of proof is greater weight of the evidence. So you weigh the evidence and you decide, has Mr. Depp proven to you the first 6 elements? The 7th one, for actual malice, the clear and convincing evidence standard, we'll get to in a few minutes. But this is what he has to prove. And he cannot do that. These are the 3 statements. And I know you may be thinking to yourself, wait a second, don't we have to decide if Mr. Depp committed abuse? And the answer is no, you don't have to. Because these 3 statements, you can decide as a matter of law, or as a matter of fact, as you weigh the evidence and the fact that they're true. So the first 2 statements I'm going to address together. Then, 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. Number 2, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse. When you go back to the jury room to deliberate, you should feel free, like I said, to read the article and think of the article's purpose. The jury instructions also tell you to take these statements in the context of the article. Think about the purpose. The purpose of the article was to promote legislative measures designed to protect victims of domestic abuse, designed to protect people who did exactly what Ms. Heard did, to speak out. That's apparent on the face of the article. And to do that, Ms. Heard talked about her own life experiences as someone who had obtained a TRO against Mr. Depp, someone who had accused Mr. Depp of domestic violence. Make no mistake, and Mr. Depp's side keeps trying to say that we're somehow suggesting that 2 years before she wrote this, that Ms. Heard hadn't had anything to do with Mr. Depp. We're not saying that. You heard Ms. Heard herself say, of course, 2 years before I wrote this article, I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out after she obtained a temporary restraining order against Mr. Depp, after she became a public figure representing domestic abuse. But the words that she wrote here, and then chronicling her own experience after that, those words are true. Those words are true. Similarly, the rare vantage point of seeing, based on her own experiences post May 27th, 2016, how institutions protect men accused of abuse, those words are true, and the First Amendment protects Ms. Heard's right to say them. Now, the third statement is absolutely true as well, but we're going to take that separately because she didn't write it. Under the First Amendment, the statements have to be false in order for Mr. Depp to win. Now, plaintiff addresses, like I said, an argument that we're not making. And as I said, we're not running from the fact that when she discussed becoming a public figure representing domestic abuse, Amber was speaking of her experiences reporting domestic abuse against Johnny Depp. She admitted to that, but that doesn't make the article or the statements about Johnny Depp. Think about it. Think about every piece of evidence that you've heard over the last 6 weeks about his abuse, about their relationship. None of that is in the article. None of it. We all know that it would be a very different article if she had written about what she suffered, that she's told you about over the last 6 weeks. Because he knows the words are true, Mr. Depp says that the words now have a defamatory implication. He says the statements are the same as saying, Johnny Depp abused me. But just because he wants to make the article about himself doesn't mean it is. He has to show you that any defamatory implication was designed and intended. Look at number 4. Designed and intended by Ms. Heard to convey the defamatory meaning that he suggests. Just because people might read the article and remember, oh yeah, Amber Heard used to be married to Johnny Depp, and she accused him of abuse, that doesn't mean that she designed and intended defamatory implications in writing about herself. And think about it. If Mr. Depp is right, then virtually any statement that anyone could ever make about their own life that implies anything, implies any involvement with any other person, could be defamatory. And that's clearly not what the First Amendment intends. She didn't design and intend the words to be the equivalent of writing Johnny Depp abused me. And you don't have to take her words for it. You can take the words of Terrence Doherty of the ACLU. He said that the op-ed wasn't even Ms. Heard's idea. The ACLU wrote the first draft, and great care was taken in drafting the article so as not to make it about Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard's relationship with him. That's the only evidence presented about Ms. Heard's motive, except her statements that was exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to talk about her experiences after Johnny Depp. She wanted to own her story after Johnny Depp and fit those into what other women experience, what other people experience having accused someone of domestic abuse and the backlash that they suffer, and then talk about legislative measures that could help protect people in those positions. That's what she meant, and that's what the article is about. There's no hidden meaning here, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't a hit piece on Johnny Depp. This isn't a hit piece on Johnny Depp. And you can end here. You can end there by saying the statements that she wrote were not false, and the First Amendment protects them. Let's talk about the headline for a minute. The headline that was published in the online version only of the article on December 18th, 2018, said, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath." A few points here. Number one, and this evidence is undisputed. There's no dispute about this. So as you weigh the evidence, you don't have to check your common sense at the door, and you can weigh circumstantial evidence, you can weigh facts, but you can't see evidence where no evidence exists. And the undisputed evidence here is that Ms. Heard didn't write the headline. She didn't approve the headline. She had nothing to do with it. She was not given notice of the headline. She testified, you saw her testify about the sexual assault that she experienced at the hands of Mr. Depp. You saw her testify about that.
Well, that's a Hail Mary he just
They're
threw.
calling her a liar. You saw her on the stand testify with your own mouth, with her own mouth, exactly what she went through for the first time in court, because people who have suffered that, they don't want to broadcast that to the world. They want to penalize Ms. Heard for not speaking about that earlier. That's ridiculous, and it's insulting, and it's victim blaming at its most disgusting. The only reference to sexual assault in the article, and you can read the op-ed, is sexual assault that she said she had experienced by the time she was of college age, before Mr. Depp. So there is a reference to sexual violence in that article, but it's not by Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp can't hold her liable for a headline she didn't write that contained something that was not about him. And they want you to think that she republished the headline by tweeting out the link to the online version. So let's look at this. This is the tweet that she sent on December 19th. The hyperlink says, "Opinion Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence." That's the online version of the article. As Ms. Heard said, you can't tweet a piece of paper. So when she wanted to share that she had written this article, what choice does she have? She has to attach that link. And the jury instructions that you have make clear that a hyperlink is not republication. Forwarding a link on does not mean that you broadcast the statement again, but that's what they want to make you think. The only way, and the jury instructions that you have, and we don't need to read through them in detail now, but the republication instruction says that merely linking to an article does not amount to republication, but adding content to a linked article may constitute republication. You must determine whether any added content was intended to reach a new audience. And if you find any content added to the hyperlink was intended to reach a new audience, it constitutes a republication. There was no content added to the article. She tweeted above the article simply saying, "Today I published this." That's what she said. She didn't add any content to it. She could have added some of the content that you've heard in this courtroom to it. She could have said, not only did 2 years ago
That's a
public figure representing domestic
that's a
abuse,
reach.
but let me tell you about the domestic abuse that I saw.
Well, lawyers have
That
hard
would be
jobs,
adding new
man.
content. This is not adding new content. But I guess it's no surprise, because this whole case is about blaming Amber Heard for things she didn't do. But that's what Mr. Depp does. It's what he's always done. Blame other people, refuse to take accountability. But the problem for him here is that he's running headlong into the United States Constitution, which says that you cannot hold Amber Heard liable for words she didn't write or publish. But here we are. Here we are. And you can decide this case without ever wading into any of the allegations, the facts, the evidence that you've heard about the heinous abuse that Ms. Heard suffered at the hands of Mr. Depp. You can decide that by determining that those statements are true and that they're protected by the First Amendment. But Mr. Depp brought this case, and he's suggesting that he was never abusive to Ms. Heard. So if that's where you want to make your decision, that's where the road ends for Mr. Depp. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be very clear. If Amber was abused by Mr. Depp even one time, then she wins. One time. And we're not just talking about physical abuse. We're talking about emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse. That's what we're talking about. Let's look at the evidence. You heard Mr. Depp define abuse from his own mouth. He admitted all of that when he talked about his childhood. As they reference, his mother called him one-eye because he had a lazy eye. And he said that that was worse than the beatings that he took. Worse than the beatings that he took. Being called one-eye by his mother was worse than the beatings that he took. And after the evidence that you've seen, some of which you're going to see, I want you to think to yourself, is being called one-eye worse than what he did to Miss Heard? Absolutely not. You'll remember his expert, Shannon Curry, agreed with all that abuse can take many forms. And you'll remember that Don Hughes, Miss Heard's expert, talked about the reports of intimate partner violence by Miss Heard, characterized by physical violence, psychological aggression, sexual violence, coercive control, and surveillance behaviors. She tested Miss Heard. She said that the tests show that there's a high degree of serious violence perpetrated by Mr. Depp toward Miss Heard. She got that opinion and that impression by reviewing the medical records of Miss Heard. She talked about the role of coercive control that Mr. Depp exercised over Miss Heard. The effect of coercive control, she said, was drastic, and it was composed of things such as possessive jealousy, the imbalance of power, not only in physical stature and physical size, but in where they were in their life and their career. By intimidation. She said writing obscene messages to your partner can absolutely be intimidating behavior. She said that Mr. Depp, after reviewing the evidence, banging and throwing and hitting things in the household, that's psychological aggression. Punching a wall, throwing something, screaming, that is abuse. That's abuse, ladies and gentlemen. She said alcohol can just throw lighter fluid off a flame in a situation of domestic violence. All of these things constitute the domestic violence that Miss Heard suffered at the hands of Mr. Depp. And he's trying to get you, to fool you, to believing that he's carried his burden of proof that never a single time in their relationship was he in any way, physically or non-physically, abusive to Miss Heard. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So let's look at some of that evidence. And like I said, you can apply your own common sense. You don't need to check that at the door when you go into the deliberation room. I'm going to walk you through the evidence, some of the evidence that's been presented, including evidence from Mr. Depp's own mouth, his own words or the words of his witnesses. Keep in mind the burden of proof. And as we go through this evidence, I'd ask you to keep this in mind as well. It's not about who's the better spouse. It's not about whether you think Miss Heard may have been abusive to Mr. Depp. It's not. Because remember, if you think that they were both abusive to each other, and that's what their witness Laurel Anderson testified to, then Amber wins. They're trying to trick you into thinking that Amber has to be perfect in order to win, even while they're ignoring Mr. Depp's many flaws. But don't fall for that trick. Amber's not perfect. None of us are. She's never pretended to be, and that's not what you're being asked to decide. One time, ladies and gentlemen, one time. If he abused her one time, Amber wins. Actually, if he fails to prove that he never abused her one time, Amber wins. So let's take a look at some of the evidence. This was one of the first messages shown to Mr. Depp in his cross-examination. This is a message to Paul Bettany, his drug buddy, early on in their relationship, when he says, "Let's burn Amber. Let's drown her before we burn her. I will fuck her burnt corpse afterwards to make sure she is dead. Some of the most vile, disgusting language that you could ever imagine. That is what he said to her at the beginning of the relationship. So let's look at how the relationship was bookended. You remembered Mr. Depp the other day in response to some text that we'll see later saying, I don't write like that. This is a bookend of the relationship. This is after it was over. I asked Mr. Depp to read that top text. You'll remember that was the only thing I asked him to read, and he immediately said, I didn't write that text, even though, of course he did. Even though he wrote the text under it that said, hopefully that cunt's rotting corpse is decomposing in the fucking trunk of a Honda Civic. That's how he bookended their relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, these words are a window into the heart and mind of America's favorite pirate. This is the real Johnny Depp.
Sounds like a pirate to me.
This is the real Johnny Depp after Miss Heard decided that she couldn't take it anymore, decided that she needed to leave him. And I'm not going to reread this whole text to you. But this is where he says she's begging for global humiliation. And she's going to get it. He says, I'll stop at nothing, and I can only hope that karma kicks in and takes the gift of breath from her. It's one of the only promises to Miss Heard that Mr. Depp has ever kept. That's how he ended the relationship. But you saw how he started it. Now, Miss Heard did testify on the stand that Mr. Depp abused her countless times. First it started, they were very happy. They started dating in 2011, and things were good. And she testified that even during periods of abuse, even during their relationship, when there was abuse occurring, that there were periods where they were very happy. It's the cycle of violence. It's the cycle of sobriety. There were periods when everything was good, when the monster was gone, and then the monster would return. You heard about how the first incidents of violence took place in 2012, when Miss Heard asked Johnny about his tattoo that used to say Winona Forever and had been changed to say Wino Forever. And she laughed. And she said, and he slapped me across the face. She thought it was a joke, and then he did it 2 more times. And then he said, I thought I put the monster away, and I've done it before. That's what he said to her during that first incidence of violence. But you don't just have to take what Mr. Depp said in his text. We can hear through his own voice what he called Miss Heard.
Because you're a fucking cunt!
We talked about the monster. You heard Mr. Depp get on the stand and say that that was Miss Heard's term. She made it up. That was what she used to refer to him when she was nagging him, because she didn't want him to have a good time. She didn't want him to have a beer once in a while.
So that's pretty interesting, right? You know? It's, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's why the interesting thing, I think, I mean, it's a long case, but he did kind of break it down to what essentially they're trying to decide on is whether if Johnny Depp, I guess, had any level of abuse one time, then that article, I guess, is within her First Amendment rights. It's interesting, man. The legal system is a trip, which, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know?
I mean, what's the point? Because at this point, they could counter sue each other. They could counter blame each other. They could counter accuse. I mean, they're accusing each other of the very same thing.
Right.
So, you know, to what, I mean, who's really at fault? You know, like, oh, he's such a villain. Well, she's a villainess. He's such a bad guy. She plays the bad guy too. I mean, it shows the childishness and the time wasted in the court system behind things that are evident where both people are more than likely playing the same role. And like attracts like. Victimizers attract victimizers, right? So, you know, I mean, to what extent are we looking at here? Because as soon as he's found guilty, she's found just as guilty. So it's like, why are we even having this conversation? Why are we even having this kind of energy put into, the court system, time and money being spent when they're both probably very much at fault. I mean, he said some pretty pietous things. I think I'm not. I wouldn't imagine him to be an angel or to be some saint in a relationship. That's a given. So it's almost to the point where it shows the agenda to vilify, right? Men that are in positions. Not to say he's wrong. I mean, he's right, but it's just like, to what end are we doing this? What's the purpose if two sides of the story are reflecting the same reality? You know what I mean? Like, it'd be different if she was an angel, right? Had never done anything, sat there, didn't cut, the man's finger, dangling off. Um, other testimonies said that she's just the nicest lady. I mean, at that point, okay, yeah, but none of them came back that way. They all came back. All these examples have resoundingly show that she's participated in the abuse just like he has. She's been, under the influence like he has, drinking 3 bottles of wine a day.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets silly. It just really gets silly to me at the point at which these things come about. And now it's like, two kids pointing the finger, two little kids pointing the finger at each other. What was your fault? What was your fault? You're both complicit. It's 50-50, but the Me Too movement won't put it that way as 50-50. They're going to twist it and turn it to being, the fault of the quote unquote, male side. And it's just sad we have to live in a time that, there's no balance, there's no equality in the justice system. It can be easily manipulated by, a couple of crocodile tears and, some quick text and tweets to try to support or try to coalesce their role into the real victims that have people that have been, abused, misused, and even, sexually assaulted. So, it's going to be an interesting outcome, but I think his case is fairly weak. I don't know what do you think about that, brother? His case doesn't sound like maybe it's the lawyering of this, maybe it's his style, but the other side sounded a lot more solid than what he's presented so far.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the problem that Amber Heard's case has is that she doesn't have any evidence of physical abuse.
Exactly.
She doesn't have any evidence, but Johnny has evidence of physical abuse.
Physical abuse, right?
He has evidence on top of evidence on top of evidence on top of evidence. He has recordings. He has medical records. He has the evidence of his finger being, partially severed. He has a picture with him with a black eye after she. I mean, right. Right. He has evidence on top of evidence. She doesn't. And it's interesting because he tried to stretch it to, any type of abuse. Verbal,
took the words right out of my mouth. He is saying that it doesn't matter, and he's trying to equate that his mother's statement about his lazy eye was much more damaging than any physical abuse.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
Shout out to these lawyers.
My finger dangling is much worse. My finger dangling is not as bad as her emotional kind of undertow of what I said about her, being, dug up as a corpse and all that kind of stuff. I mean, come on. Are you serious?
Right.
That's why I say his case sounds very weak, right? It'd be different if they could, and they, I'm sure he's going to go and try to show some type of example of physical abuse, but
well, look at her right now. She's
it's crazy, right? It's just crazy. But you know, this is the world we live in, so let's ride it out.
Indeed, it's gonna be interesting, for sure, for sure. Folks who in there, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We'll tune in to this closing statement. I highly doubt. I don't know. They might turn it around quick. It just depends. But I highly doubt we get a verdict here. So let me just get a gauge of where they're at right now, and then we might wrap this up real soon, and then follow up from there or whatnot. So let's check it out.
Thanks for that one, Vanessa. This is Mr. Depp passed out in a Tokyo hotel room during the press tour for The Lone Ranger in 2013. When Ms. Heard testified that Mr. Depp screamed at me, and all I could think were the kids are in an adjoining room. And Mr. Depp passed out with his head like this. I don't think he was sleeping on the floor because he had a bad back. They keep referring to these pictures as she took pictures of Mr. Depp while he was asleep. He's not asleep in that picture. He's passed out, drunk and high, and she's taking pictures because she wants him to realize what he's done and get help and seek help. I don't think that looks like the spice cabinet of anyone in this courtroom. That's Mr. Depp. This is Mr. Depp. This is Mr. Depp. This is Mr. Depp. And all you hear from Mr. Depp when these pictures are shown is snickering and defiance.
To that point, let me see what's going on here. What do you see in regards to the Johnny Depp's issue with substance abuse or whatnot? I mean, he has Rahu in the 12 here, Moon conjunct K2 here. You see that Rahu period for him came in 1995. You know, that's probably right when his career really started picking up, different things like that. You know, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's there. Rahu's in the 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually 29 degrees, 59 minutes. Gemini. I mean, a day later, he'd have been in the ascendant.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that just edge of the wheel type piece, right? It definitely has an impact on his overall nature.
No, actually, it just entered. Yeah. Day earlier, not day later. Maybe day earlier.
A day later, right? Oh, right. Day earlier. Excuse me, because we're going backwards. Right, a day earlier. Right. Rahu would be in the ascendant.
Yeah.
You know, the 12th Lord is a key tell with regards to his disposition in that it's conjunct Venus. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Rahu being placed there, and then the Lord, which, you know, Rahu's Lord is always the key to understanding the secrets behind that type of apparatus or that type of positioning. Yeah, you know, definitely in the sense that, you know, wanting to try to assuage or try to, you know,
escape,
calm down any type of pain or any issues that he might be facing mentally or emotionally.
Right.
But, you know, it's very close within Venus's, you know, degree. I mean, that's less than a degree. That's very, very close to being, you know, with the planet that deals with pleasure. The moon is in the 6th house, right? Also showing propensity for addictions. Wanting to detach from reality, right? So, it does make sense that this is the outcome that is a part of the reality. I mean, those are some big bags of marijuana, right? So, I mean, the dude was getting it in, right?
There's a lot of
But this
people
is
that
the
roll like
thing,
that, though. A lot of people. That don't mean that he. What I mean? There's a lot of people who roll like that.
I
I mean,
mean,
there's
I
probably a
was
time in
about to
my
say
life you
that,
could have.
that's
Time in my life you could have
Hollywood.
found me like. Shoot, that's
That's people, period.
that's regular
right? I
regular.
mean,
But there was a time
right.
in my
You know
life
what I
where I
mean?
rolled
Like,
like that.
marijuana has been legalized to some degree. I mean, in the state of California, it's not illegal to have large amounts of marijuana. I mean,
Right.
and he's a movie star. He has access to these things. It's not like, you know, it's unheard of. So, like I said, his argument is getting weaker and weaker, right? With regards to his painting the picture of Johnny Depp as being some, just, and the pictures that have been taken are just interesting. Like showing him like his head back, you know what I mean? Like, you know what
Knocked
I
out,
mean?
dude.
Like, we don't know if that's when he was drunk. It's not like
Sometimes,
he had a big glass of wine or beer in his hand. We don't know, right?
right.
We don't
But even if he
know.
was, that don't mean that he got done beating her up and then went to sleep.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then he never touched her.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's to the point of the case that is being presented is paper thin to be able to substantiate this abusive, crazed, over the top actor that has, participated. I mean, and it's marijuana and liquor. It's not like it's methamphetamines. It's not like it's cocaine.
Yeah.
It's not like it's heroin. You know what I mean? Those are hard
Well,
drugs.
it is cocaine. Cocaine's in there.
Oh, okay. I didn't even. Okay, maybe it
Yeah,
is.
cocaine, and Quaaludes.
Quaaludes. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Quaaludes make you tired, not abusive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the picture is being
And
painted.
MDMA.
Yeah, it's being painted in. And here's the thing: look to the other side of the equation. Does she participate in the same? See, it's like
She does.
somebody has to be able to claim or being able to be absolved from this type of behavior. If she's just as drunk as he is, two drunk people are going to definitely abuse one another if they're abusive patterns of behavior.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I'm at a point like the case seems very loosely presented on her side because there's no physical abuse. You have to show me he balled his fist up, punched her in the face, kicked her in the. I mean, I think what was the other claim that she was thrown down the stairs? Did I hear that correctly?
So no, what it was that she said that she was by the stairs and they were like arguing, and he thought that he was going to push her sister down the stairs like she heard that he did to Kate Moss, right?
Oh, okay.
And that's why she punched him.
Okay, I got
But
you.
Kate Moss came and testified and said that never happened. She slipped and fell down the stairs on her own. That never happened.
You know, just these things are getting to every string that is pulled is just being, further indicative of the whole, shirt of her case being unraveled.
Right.
So, I don't think they're gonna really judge this in a way and a jury can go either way. Strangely, it depends on the jury, right? And how it was picked. And that's one of the things we got to understand, that juries are picked in a way and such that many times they pick them so that the outcome is more on the side of, one or the other.
Right.
And so it's going to be, I haven't seen the jury, and I doubt if they show the jury. If the jury is full of.
I think it's a lot of Asians on the jury, surprisingly enough.
Okay.
I think there's quite a few Asians on the jury. They didn't show them, but they showed their demographics, who they are, men, women, and stuff like that. It seems like it's a lot of Asians on the jury for some odd reason.
Right. So yeah, we're gonna see. We'll see, right? But again, it seems very kind of he say, she say. I'm gonna point your finger out, and 4 or 3 are pointing back at myself. In either case, right? But the physical abuse is the line where you draw the line in the sand. And if she can't really substantiate that or support that in an egregious way to show that he was truly that villain, then I think we're going to see that he might pull out the victor of this particular matter.
Indeed. Let's check in for a couple little minutes, and then I think we can wrap this up, Rob. What you think?
Yeah, I think we're at that point where what we're stating today will be, realized once the jury deliberates and shows their judgment. But we definitely would do a follow-up, right? Whatever the verdict may be, and touch upon some of the points that could have contributed to either way this goes.
Indeed. Shout out to the chat, man. Yeah, he had them big bags of Doja.
Yeah,
I heard
definitely
that
had that.
Time. The big Doja.
In Hicksville, he took her into the bathroom of the trailer and did what he called a cavity search, where he inserted his fingers inside of her and sexually assaulted her, then trashed the trailer. And you heard this Morgan Knight person who testified a few days ago who said it was $62 of damage. You also heard evidence that the way he got involved in this trial was by reaching out to one of the main Johnny Depp fan influencers on social media. And you saw that text. That's how he injected himself into this trial. There was way more than $62 of damage. You heard testimony from Rocky Pennington, Whitney Enriquez, and Amber about him trashing the trailer. And is that really a surprise? The man's admitted that he smashes things when he gets angry. The man's admitted that he's smashed hotel rooms. You saw the quote that he admitted to the other day, that when he wants to hit something, he's going to hit it, and he doesn't care about the repercussions. So in Hicksville...
We're a little behind. I'm going to catch us up.
Hicksville was late May 2013. This is a text. Another text goes, Mr. Depp sends her this piece of poetry, calling her a lesbian camp counselor because she cared about his drinking, and just ridiculing her for trying to protect his daughter. Sickening. This text, let's fast forward a little bit to, actually before we talk about this is the Boston flight. Let's talk about the Moscow flight. The Moscow flight, when Mr. Depp and Amber, she said that was the one time she took ecstasy or MDMA with Mr. Depp, and she learned her lesson. When he hit her on the plane, when he threatened to break the flight attendant's wrist, and Miss Vasquez, again, just tried to tell you, oh, he always wore rings. Now, Miss Heard said almost all the time he did, or maybe sometimes when he didn't. And in the picture that she just showed you, PX.
So, I mean, essentially, because I've been kind of following the case a little bit, this is going to go on and on and on and on and on about these similar things or whatnot, these same points that this gentleman is bringing up or whatnot. So I think as far as from a astrological perspective, I think we've heard all we need to hear or whatnot. Shout out for y'all for checking this out. This is a little different format that we haven't used before, so definitely big up to y'all. I'm going to tune into this a little bit throughout the day to see where we land, see if the jury brings back a fast verdict. I'll be surprised if that happens for sure. But, with that being said, I want to thank you all for tuning in. This was Season 5, Episode 17 of the Cosmic Convos podcast. Big up to y'all. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. You can find us on Instagram at Cosmic Convo. That's COSMICCONVO on Instagram. From there, you can get to my personal Instagram. You can get to the Push It Forward Instagram and be able to check out all the other podcasts on the Push It Forward Podcast Network. On this channel, you'll see a content family, so you can subscribe to all the other channels we are associated with, including Brother Roz, channel for Caliprusia Astrology or whatnot. Brother Ra, how can the people get a hold of you?
You can always hit me up via IG or Facebook at Shechem Ra, or you can get at me at my website at caliprusiastrology.com. And if that doesn't get there, then you can hit me at caliprusiastrology@gmail.com.
Indeed. So
And I think one of
said,
the our listeners here, or our viewers, was asking a way to send a super chat. We definitely appreciate that. It's great that we have viewers that want to participate in a way that kind of supports the channel. We're always open to accepting things via our
you can do Cash
Patreon
App. You can do
piece,
Cash App if you want.
Cash App as well. In fact, if the brother wants
It's
to throw Cash
right.
Apps up, you might be able to do that.
Scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. So the
But in
Cash App,
fact, there you go, right? Cash App, you can go right into the Cosmic Combos pot, where we can begin to increase our output and kind of make the podcast better. That's what it's all about, is increasing this to a point where it gains some foothold and really starts to spread the word. So we appreciate that support. We definitely look forward to having you back on the channel and viewing further content. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Absolutely. And we're almost there. We're like a few hundred people away from being able to be monetized, and we can definitely do the super chats. But for now, you can definitely hit up the Cash App at $Cosmic Convos or whatnot. We definitely appreciate that. And if you're interested for some more exclusive content, or like Brother Ross said, if you're interested in classes or even just a real in-depth consultation, hit up Ra at caliprusiastrology.com. The link to the Patreon is scrolling across the screen, but it's also in the description of this video or whatnot, and all the other ones out there, right? So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in, and we are signing out. All right? Peace.
Peace.